Well, your your regular Sunday school teacher is gone this morning. I really appreciated Bob doing the stint that he did in Genesis and looking at in an in-depth way at the flood and some of the environs of it, some of the reasons or the effects of it, and so on. But I really did appreciate it. Today he's in California visiting family, so. But we appreciate it. Also, I have a greetings from his brother Ed. Talked by phone yesterday, and he's fine, and he wanted me to pass on his greetings. All right, so we left off with verse 22 of chapter 3 in Genesis. Oh, I wanted to ask Talitha, how's the year been treating you? All year? Okay, just checking. It's different around our house. I wasn't sure whether she was moving out or he was moving in, but our dog misses you. So. All right, good to have you back. With Genesis, chapter 3, verse 22. Beginning verse 20, just to read it there. Now the man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all the living. And the Lord made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. The purpose for that being they had sinned and they realized that they were naked, and they immediately felt a need to cover themselves. And when we are uncomfortable with our situation, our surroundings, or whatever, that's the first thing we want to do. And when we lose that, we've lost a God-given thing now, because we are to be modest with each other. We even treat animals that way. This past week, maybe two, they had to kill 3 mountain lions in California. We used to do that no matter what to keep them from killing us. But now they're protected some way. Anyway, they had to kill them because they found 3 mountain lions dining on a body, a human body. And when they tried to chase them off, those mountain lions were not afraid of people. So they had to dispose of them. So this is a natural thing, and that's the way God made it with man over the creation, all the animals and so forth. So when Adam and Eve realized their nakedness, they hadn't before, they covered themselves inadequately. And so God took care of the matter, but he took care of the matter with a blood sacrifice. You simply cannot cover somebody with skins from an animal without doing real damage to the animal. Real damage. And they died. So there it is. Now, the Lord said, in verse 22, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now, he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. All right? When God makes something, the thing, it really serves its purpose and serves it completely. This fruit of the knowledge from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It really worked. Now there was another tree. It would really work also. Live forever. Had they eaten of it, do you think it would have been temporary? No more temporary than the other tree. And so God had to keep them from it. Had to. So, we've got to do something. They're going to eat and live forever if they touch or eat that thing. Therefore, the Lord God sent him, that's Adam, and him be Eve too, of course, out of the Garden of Eden to begin serving their punishment, to cultivate the ground from which he was taken. You came from dirt, you dust, clay, and now you're going to have to, not that being a farmer is such a bad thing, but you realize the difference. If you're a gardener, you realize the difference between a plot of ground that seems to want to grow and a plot of ground that there's nothing you can do with it. It just won't grow stuff. So out you go. So he drove man out. At the east of the Garden of Eden, he stationed the cherubim and the flaming sword, which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. Apparently there was one entrance, and that was the entrance. And when God decrees a thing will be so, he has a way of enforcing that. And we are well advised to understand all of God's dealing and doing and purposes. Now, had they found a way back into the garden, could they have found a way in? You know, very possibly they surely would have tried it. Now, when you look here, verse 23, therefore the Lord God sent him out of the Garden of Eden. Verse 24, so he drove the man out. Suppose you had a place, rent's paid. It comes with all the food you want. Utilities. They're worthy of taxes. Isn't that wonderful? That's why it was the Garden of Eden. And then you got an eviction notice because you broke the lease. Well, you're going to stick around there as long as you can because it is free. And it is wonderful. And you took a look out there in that wide, wicked world, and whoo-hoo, this is better. So I'll stay as long as I can. So verse 24, what did God do? He drove the man out. He had to. Man had to be shown, I mean it. And so God has worked with man all through the ages. When God decrees something, Adam couldn't say, well, you know, I'm paid up through, and therefore I'm going to stay. No. God is, basically in this illustration, God's the landlord, and that's it. His word is final. And when he says something, it's that way. And how changed has the religious world made what God has decreed for salvation? It's so different. And we're not at liberty to change the lease and so on. Okay. So he was taken out. Now, out of the Garden of Eden, this is apparently the first time this had happened. the man had relations with his wife Eve. And she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I've gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. Again, she gave birth to his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and for his offering he had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. All right. They had a child. Let me just give you this, and this is not any heavy theological thing, but it's so different than anything I had come across. I'll just pass it on. I had a couple of commentaries, usually fairly reliable ones, that proposed the idea that Cain and Abel were twins. And their reasoning was the man had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I've gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. And again, she gave birth to his brother. No relations with her husband. First there was Cain, and the second one came, and that was Abel. Do what you want with it. The other thing that the people that thought this was a possibility was that when a child was born, and then when we get into the genealogies, you'll see what their reasoning is there. When a child was born, they were always born twins at the first. A boy and a girl. The girl became the wife. And they say, well, that's just like Adam and Eve. And so, and that's the way the race propagated itself so quickly. Guy came along and he already had a wife. No courting. What I would say a lot. All right. What do you think? No, I don't want to know. Okay. In these first 5 verses, we have the birth of the 2 boys. Cain first, then Abel. If they were twins, that to me, that's possible. From the language of the scripture, that is possible. They were twins. And that's why they were so close and all. If they weren't twins, well, we'll give them a year apart and be easy on Eve. As they grew up, how long is it going to be? I don't know. They became men, and use your thinker to slim things down to, well, there weren't a lot of options and stuff. You had to make a living. And you couldn't work for someone because you were the someone. There weren't any someone else's. What kind of a job would you have? It's got to be related to what we eat. So one of them became an agriculturist. The other became kind of a hunter-gatherer. But apparently these were domesticated. Do not think of man at this time as a cave dweller who had nothing behind him and no brains to speak of. And, you know, if he wanted a wife, he went out and bapped a woman on the head and drug her off by the hair. No. These were extremely intelligent people. These were people who, they were perfect specimens. They didn't have all the problems that have accrued through genealogies and our genetic stuff through the millenniums. So, all right. We have two boys, and one was pleasing in the eyes of God, and the other wasn't. They both brought what they raised, what they worked with. But one was not acceptable, and the other was. Well, first of all, with that, where was the origin of sacrifices? How did that first come about? It was seen in the Garden of Eden when God took the life of an animal and clothed Adam and Eve with it. There are a couple of thoughts. Did sacrifices come from the natural religious instinct of humankind? God just placed it within him so that man would know God is so far above man that man needs to worship God? Did it come that way? Or did God tell Adam and Eve, mankind, you need to worship me? As it were a divine appointment, you will do this. And here's why, or even here's how. And we, in the fourth verse, Adam on his part, or Abel on his part, also brought the firstlings of his flock and their fat portions. And the Lord had regard to Abel for his offering. This was good. And God said, yeah, you did well. If you went back to Hebrews chapter 11, and by faith Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice. It's along about verse 4, 6, somewhere in there. Apparently, they knew either it was ingrained or God told them that it has to be a blood sacrifice. People have changed, and I mentioned this before. This is foundational stuff for mankind. We need to understand God wants certain things of us. God will allow certain things of us, and he has set it up that way, and we have to do it that way. Now, this is the basic second example we have of you do it God's way. Adam and Eve screwed it up in the garden, and now we have two fellows, brothers, who have to make an offering. They both understand it, that they need to make an offering. And it obviously, unless God is unjust. Now, throw that out. If God were unjust, he would be doing this, not having told them, the boys, how to make an offering and what to offer. That would be unjust on his part. He didn't tell them how, and then condemn one of them for doing it like they did it. But they apparently knew. Cain knew what to offer. He substituted, well, hey, I raised this, I worked over it, I'm going to give it. Abel, well, I've got the flocks, and it's a blood sacrifice, like God said, and so I'll give it. So God was displeased with Cain. Now, what's a typical human response when We get caught with our hand in a cookie jar. An excuse. First thing, an excuse. What happens next? Well, I'm upset because I got caught. Not because I did it, because I got caught. And at that point in time, you have a fork in the road, take the fork. What are you going to do about it? God gave Cain a choice. You can do it, or you can get your countenance straightened up. You can wipe that smirk off your face. I'm sure God said it in a way that, one, Cain understood what he said, and two, God said it in a good enough way to try to get him to knock that smirk off your face, or that defiant look. But see, we're talking about human nature in the beginning, way back. So we have, in the course of time, Cain brought his offering, Abel brought his offering, and the Lord had regard to Abel, but not Cain's. But Cain, this is verse 5, but for Cain and for his offering he had no regard. So Cain became angry, his countenance fell, the bad look. When we have something we want to express, it shows, we call it body English. I don't know what they call it in Russian. Is that body Russian? It's what? You listening, Jason? Pay attention. All right. Well, she's smiling. He's more sober. Okay. Why are you angry? Is verse 6. Why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen? He's saying this to Cain. If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it. This desire, this word desire, this is the same word that was used in the garden to describe what Satan was doing to Adam and Eve. His desire was for them, crouching. And this is crouching, ready to spring, at full alert. Why are you angry? Does sin make any sense? When you did something wrong and you were told all about it, do it this way, and you just, no, I'm going to do it that way, and you get caught at it, does it make sense to get angry? No, it does not, but it is a response. God knew this, and so he's trying to head this off. Why are you angry? Why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? Won't you be happy with yourself? And if you do not well, or do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you. But you have a choice and an obligation to yourself and to whoever you've wronged. Master it. We use the word overcome. We have to overcome. And when we get to this is the first of the Bible, we get to the very end, and in Revelation, the 7 churches of Asia had the refrain, to him who overcomes. God dealt with man through all the ages, and we get down to the very end, and it's still the same thing. Sin's crouching at the door here. You must master it. Overcome. We get down to Revelation, we're still having to overcome. We're still human beings. We still have the same problem that man has always had to deal with, the problem being sin. Okay. So if you do well, things are going to be better. So we look in verses 8 through 16. We won't read them all at once, but we have murderers. The way they act, what goes on. Now this is interesting. Verse 8. Cain told Abel his brother. Now, told. No, he said to Abel his brother is a literal of it. So he said to Abel his brother, and if you read the whole verse, you're going to come up with this. Abel said to his brother, let's go out in the field. Let's go out in the field. What I have in mind, Dad won't like. May not let me do it. Let's go out in the field. Let's get aside. Let's go where we won't be bothered. It was easier for them than it would be for us. Where are you going to go today where you won't have people around and a camera to watch you? Let's go out in the field. The way he put it, Cain told his brother, and it came about when they were in the field, let's go out in the field, that Cain, did he discuss it? I don't see any discussion here. I really don't. He had, his countenance had fallen, things were bad, his attitude was just rotten. He had decided in his mind, premeditated, let's go out in the field. He didn't say the rest of that sentence where it would have said, where I can kill you. Had anybody died before? You think Cain maybe wasn't fully aware of what he was about to do? People who have, I don't know about this, but I'll just, what I see. Sometimes brothers and sisters, and they'll say, oh, I'd like to kill him. They don't mean that. But, you know, disagreements, so on. Here, came about that when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Now, doesn't take very long to say that, and I suspect that's kind of how it happened. He took him out in the field and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where's Abel, your brother? Reminiscent of the Garden of Eden. When sin had happened, God came along. Adam, where are you? I hid. Well, here, Cain says, and he said, I do not know. And a stupid thing to say, am I my brother's keeper? Denial. I'm innocent because I don't even know about this. Have you practiced your innocent look lately? We do. We can put on a good front. Occasionally in school, we came across kids that were very expressive. And I really appreciated kids that their face, instead of practicing the innocent look, their face would actually show guilt or I wish I hadn't done that or something like that you could appreciate. Jason, you had your hand up?
I was just going to say that, you know, if you really look at this and see what sin does in our relationship and how we even approach God. I mean, can we be so flippant to say, but, am I my brother's keeper, God? Come on. You know, but it really does show how it separates us more and more, even in our relationship towards the holiness of God. And I just thought it was very interesting that he would approach God like that. Right?
Yeah. And God is the perfect parent. In this case, he's acting as a parent. He's the perfect parent. And for some of you, I could say, well, he's the perfect grandparent. Because he's kind of like that, Adam and Eve, and then there's another generation. With this being the perfect one, he's going to mete out proper punishment. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Then in verse 10, he said, "What have you done?" Do you realize the seriousness of your action? What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. When with that statement, those two statements, Cain had his hide pinned to the wall. He could not get out of this. He had to realize that your actions have consequences. Your brother's blood. Verse 11. Now, and here comes the punishment. Now you are cursed from the ground. What was his occupation? He worked the ground. Yeah, agriculture. You're cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. All right, you worked the ground, the ground received your brother's blood. You did this from your hand. And verse 12. When you cultivate the ground, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment's too great to bear. Behold, you've driven me this day from the face of the ground, and from your face I will be hidden. And your face, I will be hidden, and I will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." And God at that point could have said, "So, what Cain has done is to complain that his punishment was too great. You're over punished me. You've overreacted, God. It appears as though God has exercised a considerable amount of restraint. Could have struck him dead on the spot. He did not. Does God love his creation? Did he create at this time? Was it a good creation? Well, it was good, but it was certainly marred and was getting worse. Dan.
I thought it is possible, entirely possible. One of the reasons God had no respect for his offering is because of the type of person he was before the offering. It probably helps contribute to God's disregard for his offering
All right, good thought. There's so much stuff here. In verses 10 through 14, basically, we have that Cain sees his punishment, and he's claiming it's too severe. God, this is just too much, and he puts it in various language. My punishment's too great to bear. Why, nobody could stand up under this. My punishment's just too great. And here you've driven me from the face of the ground. This is where I make my living, and now I can't do that. And from your face, I'll be hidden. Now, he had the face of God, the presence of God, before this, apparently, but not now. He says, I see what's coming, and I've lost this. So, whoa. This is too much. Now, we read the next two verses, 15 and 16. So the Lord said to him, to Cain, therefore, whoever kills Cain, now you say, well, man, I'm gonna die. Whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold, on the killer of Cain. On sevenfold. And the Lord appointed a sign for Cain, so that no one finding him would slay him. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So God said, no, there won't be anyone kill you. But what I have said will happen to you, will happen to you. The ground won't produce for you, and you're going to wander, and you're a marked man. There's going to be a sign on you. Vengeance will be taken. The Lord appointed a sign for Cain, a mark. Now, I don't know if it was something he had got a badge, or something that he hung on himself, or something he had to carry around. You know, don't leave home without it. Someone will kill you. So, all right. It was that, or if it was some kind of a physical mark, or if it was an appearance, a look. I don't know. It might have been, man, the guy was accused. He was made to be a blonde. You know, wow. Hi, Darren. I do know what she's Veronica. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering about this, but back there, Adam and Eve were the parents of Cain and Abel. And then back there in verse 12, where it says, whoever finds me will kill me. Who is the whoever?
Well, these writers, I wish they had, I've said this so many times, but allow me to say it again. I wish they'd have written chronologically. There's been some time go on here. Now, suppose that this idea that these people had, whoever had a child, it was always a twin. And so there were people. Also, there's this. He's saying this for the present, but there's going to be a future, because Cain isn't going to be killed, and there will be people in the future that will be looking for him. And I can't help but think that these people are going to be the descendants of Abel. They're looking for the guy that killed Grandpa Abel. Or if we see him, he's a dead man. But God said, no, you won't. See, so there's all of that. He's looking ahead, knowing full well there will be. But I think there's not just this one little lonely family wandering about on a great big earth at this time. They're starting to be people.
I was just going to say, the next chapter, so we're going to find out that Adam lived 930 years, Seth lived 912 years, Cain probably lived over 900 years himself, and with all those kids, Josephus says that Adam had like 33 sons and 22 daughters, or something like that. But so tradition says that, you know, in that amount of time they could have lots and lots of kids, and the population growth would be much more rapid. So
Okay. So there is that, and we're down to the place now, through verse 16. Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. It tells us a little bit about the place, and the land of Nod means literally the land of wanderers. So that's what Cain became, that's what Cain's descendants became, and that's what happened to him. So he had descendants, so nobody killed him right off. And maybe he already had descendants from when this happened. See, all I can read is what's here, and I can't go beyond that for sure. I can wonder, but that's all I'm allowed. Okay, we got to stop. Thank you so much for your attention this morning. God bless you, and we'll go on with verse 7.